Hi everyone, and welcome back to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
And yesterday we told the story of Coca-Cola.
Yes.
We looked at how it began when it was invented by a drugstore worker called John Pemberton.
That's right. This was back in the 1880s, more than a century ago. And back then, these sort of healthy magic medicine elixir drinks that were supposed to taste good and make your body super healthy were very popular. So he wanted to make a drink like that with wine, but suddenly it was impossible. Wine was illegal in the state of Atlanta in the US where Pemberton was working. So we had to come up with a new product, a new recipe.
Yeah, so this law in Atlanta, Georgia was made in 1886.
I remember that, yeah.
You're older than you look.
Yeah.
So he couldn't make it with wine. Instead, he made it with coca leaves and cola nuts. Coca-Cola, there's the name of the drink. Now, these kind of made you feel quite full of energy because the coca leaves and cola nuts contained cocaine and caffeine, respectively.
That's right.
So a drink with cocaine in. Interesting idea.
It was an interesting idea. It proved to be very popular, but of course it's illegal these days. You can't put cocaine in your drink or anything because it's a dangerous, illegal drug. But back then it was used just as a natural medicine. So it wasn't illegal, so there was actually cocaine in the original Coca-Cola. But there isn't now. They've replaced it. There's just caffeine. It still gives you the energy and, of course, lots of sugar. And then Pemberton, he didn't make billions. He didn't even make millions. He sold the recipe of his drink to businessman Asa Candler in 1888.
Yep, Candler made the drink one of the world's most popular beverages in the 20th century.
He's the guy who made all the money.
Yep, now Coca-Cola it's maybe the number one, but not far below it is Pepsi. And we're going to learn about Pepsi today. Let's find out more.
Reading.
Fun facts. Coca-Cola's biggest rival, the soft drink brand Pepsi, also has a colorful history. The brand even played a role in international politics. In 1959, U.S. Vice President Richard Nixon visited the USSR, which was then the U.S.'s biggest enemy. He went to debate with the leader of the country about different forms of government. The countries were planning an exhibition where they would learn about each other's products. The night before, Nixon gave some Pepsi to the Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev. He loved it. Pepsi immediately started sending its product to the USSR. The money that was used by the USSR was not traded internationally. Because of this, Pepsi received some strange payments. They were given lots of vodka and later on a whole fleet of ships. Today, Coca-Cola sells better than Pepsi in Russia. However, Pepsi can still hold its head high as it was the first American brand to find success in the USSR.
All right, so yesterday it was all about Coca-Cola's history, and today we're looking at their big rival, their big opponent, Pepsi. What do you guys know about the history of Pepsi? Well, if you're like me, not very much. So let's see what we can discover about Pepsi's history. It says Coca-Cola's biggest rival, the soft drink brand Pepsi, also has a colorful history. All right, colorful here, of course, just means interesting history. We're not talking about the colors of its signs or bottles. We're talking about how interesting the history of Coke's rival is. And rivals they are, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. We could also put in like Adidas and Nike or Burger King and McDonald's or something like that.
Apple and Samsung.
Apple and Samsung in the phone business. That's right. A rival is kind of like an opponent. It's who you're playing against. Maybe not your enemy. There's maybe no anger anger there, but you're like, ooh, I want to beat that person. And it's the person or the team or the group that you're usually competing against. There might be others out there, but these are the two powerful teams. These are the two ones that have a long history of battles, of winning and losing against each other. So we can think of these big companies that make similar products. Of course, we can think of great sports rivalries, you know, the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox or the LA Lakers or the Chicago Bulls or something like that. As teams that, you know, have a long history of playing and competing and fighting against each other. They could do it in good spirit, but they always want to win. That's what rivals do.
Exactly. Now, we're not actually going to go and look at the very start of the Pepsi history.
Okay.
We're going to take an interesting moment from Pepsi's history.
Well, I think Pepsi started just a few years after Coca-Cola, a long time ago.
In a similar kind of way.
Yeah.
You can look that up online.
Yeah.
But here we're looking at a particular incident. We see in the article the brand even played a role in international politics. So to play a role in something, it's kind of like an actor playing a role in a play. You're in the play, you're part of the play. You are involved, you can affect it in some way. So we could say play a role in or play a part in, and it just basically means you're involved. You did something, you were present at this thing, and your presence kind of changed the events. It was part of the story.
Interesting. So Pepsi, the soft drink, was part of a big story from the past in international politics. International meaning around the world, between countries, and politics is one of those areas that countries will sort of meet up and have, you know, different encounters and interactions, because politics is about power. It's about law. It's about government. It's about presidents and elections and things like that. So when you're talking about politics, you're talking about mayors and presidents, you know, city politics, you know, to change what happens in your town, and national politics in your country, and world politics around the world when the US and China are talking to each other. That's international politics. Big things, big power, big decisions, and sometimes big people. For example, the young woman wanted to work for the government, so at school she studied politics and the law, because government is often about politics, the law, and things like that.
Okay.
So Pepsi in international politics.
Yes.
Was World War II started because someone didn't have enough Pepsi?
No, it was between Pepsi and Coke. That's the real
I see.
story.
Oh, okay,
no,
okay.
That's not true. This, in fact, happens sometime after World War II.
Okay.
We see in the article that in 1959...
Oh, yes, I remember.
You are on. 1959, U.S. Vice President Richard Nixon visited the USSR, which was then the U.S.'s biggest enemy.
America and Russia. Ooh.
Or USSR, the Cold War.
Right.
Okay. Now, at that point, President Nixon he wasn't president then. He did become that later, but then he was vice president.
Yes.
The vice president is the second most important person in the country that has a president. You could also use vice president for a company or even a department, like the vice president of marketing. So if the president is the top person, the vice president is the number 2. And if something happens to the president, then the vice president takes over. All
right, let's talk about the USSR. Yes, we're going back in history a little bit to the Cold War, as Pat stated, which happened kind of after World War II until the end of the 1980s, when the USSR broke up into these other countries, the biggest one of which, and of course the biggest one back then, was Russia. So often when we see USSR, we think of Russia during the Cold War. It was known as Cccp in their own language, so you might see that on Olympic posters from back in the day. But basically, it was the communist government of Russia and the territories that it controlled, and it was the other power in the Cold War between the US and the Western powers and Russia and some of the Eastern powers.
Yep, and because it was the Cold War, the US and the USSR were enemies. If you are enemies, then you really are opponents. But not just like opponents who, like two sports teams playing each other in a game. If you're an enemy, then there's a bit of hatred. There's a lot of ill feeling. You really don't like this other group. You're trying to beat them, often in a war. Now, this wasn't a war with lots and lots of fighting in big battles. The Cold War was a lot of kind of trade stuff, spying behind the scenes, using other countries to kind of carry out acts. But they were still enemies. People didn't like the people from the other side. Here's an example sentence. At the end of the movie, the hero had an exciting fight against his enemy. So, Nixon went to the USSR, which would have been a big deal back then.
It was a big deal, and he brought a lot of cool American products like televisions and cars and refrigerators because the Russians, the USSR, didn't have that kind of stuff. So he wanted to show off the power of America in the Western world. And Nixon went for another important reason. He went to debate with the leader of the country, the leader of the USSR at that time, Nikita Khrushchev, about different forms of government. Yes, so they were going to have a debate. It was a meeting, but there was also going to be this debate. And of course, everyone was trying to look good on TV and in the newspapers. And in a debate, two politicians or just two people with different opinions, different points of view will have kind of an argument against each other. But it's not an argument where people should be angry and shouting or calling each other bad names or something. It should be based on facts and logic and about making the best speech and changing the people's minds. Think of it kind of like as a sport, but with your mind instead of your body and your muscle. You're trying to use the best ideas, use the best speaking skill, and the people watching, the audience, might vote at the end or might choose, or certainly you'll change their thinking if you can debate very well. We could use it both as a noun, I went to a debate, or the two politicians debated about some important question or important issue. Here's a good example of a friendly debate. The two friends had a debate about who was the best basketball player in the world. So one of them thought it was Steph Curry, one of them thought it was LeBron. Who knows who they thought, but they're like, no, you're wrong. It's him because da-da-da. And they're not angry. They're just, sharing ideas and trying to see who can make the best argument.
To use it as a verb, we could say the two friends debated who was the best basketball player in the world.
Sure.
Now here, they were debating the different kinds of government they had. The US was obviously a democracy. The USSR was a communist country run in that way with a single party controlling and everything supposed to be shared. But they were forms of government. The government is the legal ruling group who controls a city or a country or part of a country, something like that. We could talk about a city government, a county government, a state government, things like that. They are the people who are chosen by everybody else. They choose them in an election. The people who win the election form a government, and to use a verb similar to this, they govern. They create rules, they decide what the country is going to do, and things like that. Here's an example sentence. The government just announced that school is cancelled because of the typhoon.
It's one of their jobs, the government. The students can't choose.
No.
It's the government's job. All right, let's get back to this famous debate between Richard Nixon and the Premier of Russia. It says the countries were planning an exhibition where they would learn about each other's products.
That's cool.
Right. They had this exhibition, this big show. And that's what an exhibition is. It's an organized public display or show of something. Now, we're not talking about a show like a performance, like I went to a dance show or something like that. No, we're talking about something that's more for information, for people's knowledge, to get them to know about, see, discover, and learn about new things. Businesses often have exhibitions, right? A car exhibition might be for people who are interested in cars, maybe work in the car business, sell them, they want to buy a new car, and they'll kind of organize it by different companies or different countries or something. And anyone who's interested, who wants to learn more, can go down to the exhibition hall, as they often call these big places where people go and they'll see things at an exhibition, which, as I said, are usually organized on different topics or different products or things like that. For example, this exhibition is for companies that make bicycles and other exercise equipment. So if you want a car, don't go to that one. But if you want a bike, that's the one to go to.
So in that sentence, we also use today's grammar point, and this is the use of where as a relative pronoun in a defining relative clause. So yesterday we saw a non-defining clause to add information. A defining relative clause adds necessary defining information about a subject. In our sentence, we're giving necessary information about this exhibition, telling people what it is and what it's for, what's being shown there. So when where is used as the relative pronoun, it could be giving more information about a place or more information about an event. And in this case, just like in our article, the word where means the same as at which or in which. Here's an example of a sentence like that. Tom is planning a special dinner where he'll propose to his girlfriend. So that's the exhibition. It's going to show off all these American products and all these Russian products so both sides can learn about each other.
That's right. And both sides wanted to look really good in front of the world because of course, all the newspapers and reporters were there. And let's read on. It says the night before, so I guess the night before the exhibition, or certainly before the debate between the two leaders, Nixon, the American, gave some Pepsi to the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. Okay, that's kind of a nice thing to do, I guess. But here we use this adjective Soviet. Remember we talked about the USSR, that old name for Russia during the Cold War? Well, that was also Soviet Russia, so we can use it to talk about Russia at that time compared to now when it has a different kind of government. The leaders have different titles. It's not the same. History has moved on. But if we look at Russia sort of between 1917 and 1990, around then when the Cold War ended, that was Soviet Russia, Communist Russia, the Russia of Lenin and Stalin and Gorbachev and Khrushchev. That's what we're talking about there. And we could also say a person from there at that time was a Soviet or a Soviet person.
Exactly.
Like a Soviet astronaut.
Yeah, and so Nixon gave Khrushchev some Pepsi, and we see...
I got some Pepsi for you.
Good impression.
Oh, thank you.
And so Khrushchev, he loved it.
He loved it. He loved it? Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it's the first time he'd ever had something that sweet.
Sure, well,
and it says Pepsi immediately started sending its product to the USSR. The leader of Soviet Russia loves it. Let's send it over by the boatload and start selling Pepsi in Russia. And I'm guessing that Coca-Cola wasn't already for sale in Russia.
Probably
so
not.
Pepsi saw a new market.
Yes.
Very interesting.
This kind of international trading business was a little complicated. We see in the article that the money that was used by the USSR was not traded internationally.
Soviet rubles.
Yeah, because of the difference in politics, other countries would say, sorry, we can't take that money, we can't use that money, there's a bit too much of a kind of a difference here between us, this democratic West, and you guys, so we can't take your actual cash. We couldn't use it, we're not going to deal with it. So
interesting. Maybe like if I was doing business in North Korea, I couldn't take that money to America and change it in a bank because they'd be like, we don't take North Korean money, are you crazy? So they had to be paid for their Pepsi in a different way. And actually it got a little interesting. It says, because of this problem with Russian Soviet money going to an American company, because of this, Pepsi received some strange payments.
Right.
They did get paid for the Pepsi, but not with money.
No, it was things. We see in the article, they, meaning Pepsi, were given lots of vodka, and later on, a whole fleet of ships.
Was the Pepsi what?
They got a fleet of ships.
A fleet of ships?
Yes, we'll look at that in a moment.
Boats
we'll look at...
For Pepsi.
Yeah, vodka first. Vodka is one of the alcohols we mentioned in day one. We talked about alcohol. Vodka is a strong alcohol. It's very similar to Gaoliang in some ways. It's made of grain, sometimes potatoes, and then they kind of treat it to remove all the taste from vodka. Vodka should have no real strong flavor, just a strong alcohol effect. It makes you do that. It is a very popular drink in Russia, Poland, Finland, and other sort of northern and eastern countries. And people do use it a lot to mix with other drinks.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very strong.
It is very strong, but along with whiskey and maybe gin, rum, it's one of the more popular alcohols. People make cocktails and stuff out of it. But yes, it is quite strong and very Russian. Anyway, so they got a lot of vodka for their Pepsi. But what are these guys at Pepsi going to do with thousands of bottles of vodka? Good question. Or what are they going to do with a fleet of ships? They're a soft drink company, not a navy, because a fleet is a large group of ships. Basically, we're talking about big boats. So think of warships, or think of those big ships that carry boxes of products all around the world, or cruise ships that fill up with thousands of people for holidays, like a big floating hotel. Now take one of those and add 20 to that, and then you have a fleet. You have a large group. So yes, big countries like America has a fleet of Navy ships. These warships, or a big cruise company would have a fleet of cruise ships carrying passengers all around the world. And of course, Evergreen, the big Taiwanese company, they have a fleet of cargo ships that carry stuff all over the world. But these are companies that do that, not companies that make sugared water into soft drinks. Companies that make soft drinks maybe need one ship, but not a fleet of ships.
I guess maybe they could have sold them to the government or something like that.
Could have, but that's a bit of a headache.
Who knows? What we do know, though, is that this success didn't quite last. We see in the article today, Coca-Cola sells better than Pepsi in Russia. Coke makes more money, it's
really?
more popular.
Well, I guess Pepsi's happy to not have so many ships. And it says, however, Pepsi can still hold its head high, as it was the first American brand to find success in the USSR. So there you go. It got into Russia, the USSR at that time, before Coca-Cola, before McDonald's, before many of those big American companies. So yes, they can hold up their head up high, or hold up their head high. You could say it either way. Be proud of yourself. Take some pride in your achievements, and check out our pocket phrase go, and hold your head up high.
Pocket phrase go!
虽然花妈号称最强家庭主妇，但是呢，其实也是有很多人呢，例如这个橘子啦、柚子啦，哎呀，他们呢都觉得这个家庭主妇很好当哦，哎，每天呢不是就躺在家里看韩剧，时间到了再来煮饭就好了吗？哎呀，被讲了几次呢，花妈我也是会心情低落的哦。直到呢那天三角太太跟我说，花妈，你每天煮饭、洗碗、打扫啊 ，You should hold your head up high， 没有错，我应该感到骄傲才对啊 ！Hold somebody's head up high， 或者是呢，我们直接说 hold somebody's head high， 把头呢举得高高的，哎，是不是呢？感觉气势也比较强一点呢？英文里面呢这一句呢就表示有自信的，感到骄傲的哦。比方说啊，我每天呢为家里付出，我应该感到骄傲。Hold my head up high， 就是呢这个意思喽。
Right, and Pepsi could hold their head up high because they achieved success.
Definitely.
Success is the achieving of goals. You try to do something, you do it. That is a success. You try to win a competition, you win. That's a success. So anything like that, anything where you do what you plan to do or set out to try to do is a form of success.
I plan to have a nap this afternoon.
I'm sure you can do it. Anyway, here's another example sentence. Sorry, I didn't have any success getting a table at that popular restaurant. That means I couldn't get one.
Everyone wants to go to McDonald's.
Yep. Well, McDonald's is one brand, Pepsi's another, and we're going to talk more about that in today's For You Chat question.
For You Chat.
So today's question, which popular brands or products come from your country? And which product from your country would you choose to show the world and why?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, as modern and cool and nice and wonderful as Canada is, we actually still cut down a lot of trees, sell a lot of wood, dig up a lot of metal like nickel and other things and sell that. So not so many products, but Lululemon is a very popular brand of yoga clothes and also very expensive, which I've noticed a lot of people here wearing.
And Roots as well,
Roots
right?
is also a Canadian product. Bombardier, which make jets and trains and things like that. A very successful company, but you might not know it because usually the airplanes have different names on them. But these are some of the Canadian companies that are out there doing big business around the world.
Okay, I'm going to go for the UK brand Marmite. This black, thick, salty spread. It is so delicious.
It is delicious.
His country once banned it and said that they would not... you banned Marmite in Canada.
Man,
can you believe
terrible.
it? That's worth a whole article in itself one day. Let's just say some people love it, some people will think it's the most disgusting thing ever. And that's why it's so special and I want to share it.
And some
with the
people
world.
like it, but actually like Vegemite a bit more.
Boo!
Sorry!
Boo! Okay, that's an Australian brand, but that's for another time. We're out of time for today. Thanks for watching, everybody. For English for You, I'm Pat.
I'm Mike.
Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Fun facts. Coca-Cola's biggest rival, the soft drink brand Pepsi, also has a colorful history. The brand even played a role in international politics. In 1959, U.S. Vice President Richard Nixon visited the USSR, which was then the U.S.'s biggest enemy. He went to debate with the leader of the country about different forms of government. The countries were planning an exhibition where they would learn about each other's products. The night before, Nixon gave some Pepsi to the Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev. He loved it. Pepsi immediately started sending its product to the USSR. The money that was used by the USSR was not traded internationally. Because of this, Pepsi received some strange payments. They were given lots of vodka and later on a whole fleet of ships. Today, Coca-Cola sells better than Pepsi in Russia. However, Pepsi can still hold its head high as it was the first American brand to find success in the USSR.
Vocabulary Review.
Politics. Aaron knows politics well and wrote a book on how countries choose their leaders. Enemy. Ben and Robert were once friends, but now they are enemies and won't talk to each other. Debate. In class, the students debated whether smoking should be against the law. Government. Taiwan's current government was formed in 2020 with Tsai Ing-wen as its president. Exhibition. Last week, the History Museum had a special exhibition showing art from ancient Egypt. Success. Mark's recent success in the talent show surprised everyone because no one thought he could sing.
智慧小补帖
Rival. Vice President. Vodka. Fleet.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作。活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net